news in the world here, Tom, and not all of it COVID-19 related. Some of it just like, hey, stuff happened in enterprise IT, because it turns out the world still has things occurring in it, even if we're all living at home, staying at home, just homebound. Things are still happening, which is kind of fun.
Yes, to everything, turn, turn, turn.
That's an interesting turn of phrase. I don't know where that's coming from. So we're going to get started right now. I'm going to count us in, and then we'll go into podcast mode. And remember, if you missed any of this, if you're just catching us at the beginning, you want it in your ears, we do have a podcast feed. Just search for Gestalt IT Rundown, your podcast of choice. Always a good option as well as the video. So let's get it going, Tom, in 3, 2, 1. Hello, all, and welcome to the Gestalt IT Rundown, your weekly look at the IT news of the week. I'm your host, Rich Stroffolino. I'm an editor at Gestalt IT. Joining me from across this great nation of ours is the one, the only, Tom Hollingsworth. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Rich. I am thoroughly enjoying March 457th as it is today, and we'll see how things go.
Tom, I've been recently, like everyone else, obligatorily watching The Tiger King, and I know that's that's kind of close to home to you. And I was going to introduce you as our networking Tiger King, but I decided against that. I just need to let everyone know, though, that we are aware that Tiger King is a thing. Tom lives in Oklahoma, and we're going to leave it at that. So first up here on News or Nah, wanted to get into this, and all of a sudden my browser just signed me out, so that's really cool. But first up on News or Nah is kind of the news that Microsoft is going to be exiting doing physical events till at least the first half of 2021. This comes from Microsoft Whisper Mary Jo Foley, who is, in a lot of ways, in all things, really, knowing what's going on in Microsoft. This will affect obviously anything going on this year, but looking at bigger shows like Ignite, looking at things like Build, MVP Summit 2021, basically everything in the first half going to be all digital. Tom, Microsoft Digital, news or not?
I think this is news because it shows that making an event happen is not a, hey, let's do a thing kind of situation. I was talking to my friend Tani Odia at Ekahau yesterday, and she was telling me that the what she's hearing from people inside of the industry is that pretty much the rest of 2020 is a write-off from an event perspective, because you have 6 to 9 month lead times that require planning and processing, getting hotel rooms and convention space booked. So what the cancellations that you're seeing now, like the Ignite cancellation just came across the wire yesterday, officially, that is an event in September. So we're 6 months out for cancellation. So if this goes another month, you're already into October. Nobody really does anything in November, December, except for Amazon. So, you're kind of looking at a write-off for the rest of the year. I mean, the only thing that I know of on the calendar right now is VMworld, and who knows what's going on with that.
Yeah, we will see if that actually ever occurs. Speaking of things that will never occur, if you heard a sad whimper this week, it was Xerox announcing it was dropping its hostile takeover bid of HP. The company cited the uncertainty around the COVID-19 pandemic and the fact that no one seemingly wanted it outside of Xerox, and they were the much smaller party in this transaction. And they'll drop their bid also to take over HP's board, which they're going to do with a share buyout. News or not here, Tom?
News, if only so that we can put this news story to bed. This is literally the equivalent of the guy going up to the girl and be like, do you want to go out? No. Do you want to go out? No. Do you want to go? No. All right.
This was shareholder harassment is what you're saying.
Yeah. In lack of a better term, this was an ill-advised takeover attempt at best that happened at the worst possible time for this. Although we're seeing a lot of M&A and activity that's happening already. We'll get to that in a minute. But I don't really know where this is going to happen. And let's be fair, even if Xerox did manage to appease the shareholders of HP and make this happen, do you really think the Federal Trade Commission is going to be okay with Xerox owning all of the printers in the world?
Next up here on News or Not, after initially publishing a blog post that Azure service usage increased 775% in regions with shelter-in-place orders, Microsoft was forced to clarify that the stat actually referred to a 775% increase in Teams calling and meeting monthly users in 1 month, specifically looking at Italy. So kind of having some larger claim to their overall cloud usage to something very specific. Effectively, this was forced on them by SEC disclosure that this could affect shareholder value and that kind of stuff for forcing them to do that. So, Tom, news or not that Microsoft had to make this correction, but also that Teams spike is significant, but I think way less significant than a 775% increase in Azure overall, right?
It's significant but we kind of knew that was going to happen. I mean, it was kind of like when Chuck Robbins went on CNBC and said that they've done over 5 billion video conferencing meeting minutes in the last 90 days or something. Of course, 45 of those days were pre-outbreak. This reminds me of all that stuff that you see, like if you watch baseball. First of all, if you watch baseball, God help you. But how every batter has to be 1 or 2 in some random statistic that the statistics department was employed to find. So like they're the best leadoff hitter whose last name starts with Z that plays on teams named after animals in months that start with J. And number 2 is a guy that died in 1927 or something. It's like, okay, we get it. You had to come up with a statistic. I was really excited when this was 775% traffic increase because maybe that was enough to finally put Oracle Cloud out of its misery. But now I'm not so sure. So.
Sadly, I mean, like that number, even as much as people are leaning on cloud services these days, we've seen reports from, app analysts saying like downloads for all these apps are up, like, but they were up like 200% or something, like, though, and still insane numbers, still like Microsoft Teams paid users up like effectively doubled over the course of less than a month. So like I was expecting insane numbers, but 775% on Azure usage overall did seem like incredibly high. And I would think we would see like a lot more like outages or just constraints on their business overall. So I'm glad we have some actual context for what that number actually meant. Next up here on News or Not, during an analyst call this week, Slack CEO Stuart Butterfield, one of my favorite named CEOs, announced the company was working on call integration features with Microsoft Teams, their biggest rival. No idea when this integration would roll out, and all a Microsoft spokesperson would say is our Microsoft 365 application programming interfaces are public and open to customers and all third-party developers and robot transmission. Cross-productivity calling, though, Tom. News or not?
News, but mostly because that means that Microsoft and Slack now have to play nice. I mean, realistically speaking, did you know that Slack could make phone calls? Because not a lot of people do. It's not a function that a lot of people use. Now, on the flip side, I think people are using Teams a lot for that functionality because Teams is Skype 4.0, maybe. I think we're on now.
We'll get into that in a little bit.
Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit. But long story short, integrating those two platforms in any kind of way is a step into a larger discussion about cross-platform availability. I mean, can you imagine how crazy it'd be if the people who use AT&T couldn't call Verizon because those two can't work together?
I do like it. It took a pandemic to like the idea of having the same functionality as a phone number to occur to these two companies. What I think is, I mean, it's interesting. Yeah, you're absolutely right that Teams has that because it's integrated into Outlook, into what you're already using for your calendar and other productivity. I think you're more likely to just view it as part of that overall productivity suite, whereas Slack is like very specifically like this messaging thing that can be built out to be other things, but at its core, like it's kind of almost, because it is a standalone product, it's a standalone product. If that's reductive, I apologize.
Yeah.
And finally, here on News or Not, Google announced it would resume updates to Chrome with plans to release Chrome 81 on April 7th. The new version was scheduled previously for release on March 17th, but Google suspended updates on Chrome browser and Chrome OS to avoid disruptions as people started working from home. Don't want to break things on the first day. Everybody's doing that. An official Chrome 82 release has been canceled, and the features will be rolled into Chrome 83 and other minor releases that Chrome 83 is expected in mid-May. So Chrome resuming updates. News or not here, Tom?
Not really news. Google had to come to this point at some point in the future because, well, a day without Chrome updates is the apocalypse. But I think that what really happened is Google was going to try to make a big stand about, hey, we're not going to break anything for the next month. And Apple released how many iOS updates in that time? And so Google's like, well, crap, now we look like dorks. So they're just going to go back to what they were doing before. The funny thing is, like, you want to know if how this Google could have made this news? We're not going to kill any more products for the next 3 months.
That definitely would have turned some heads. I mean, Tom, as someone who has administered systems and stuff like that, like how big of a deal was freezing Chrome updates? To me, I don't know. I've personally, as an end user, now this is purely as an end user. I'm not supporting anybody. I'm not, working with remote teams. I've never experienced an issue where I shut down Chrome, restarted it, and all of a sudden, like something mission critical broke. I mean, is that all that common in your experience?
Not really. I mean, the worst that's happened is the tab bar layouts changed a couple of times on me.
Okay.
No big deal. I mean, I'll tell you that I didn't even notice this is a thing because I've just gotten to the point where I ignore the little arrow in the corner that's like upgrade because I don't care. I mean, this is the problem with just-in-time software delivery or continuous improvement. When the new version of iOS and watchOS and macOS and OS came out, I was like, hey, I need to schedule a time to upgrade these things because even though there's like 2 minor features in it, I still want those features. When there's a new version of Chrome, literally don't care.
All right. And first up on our discussion, something I think we both are interested and care about. Palo Alto Networks continued their recent acquisition spree. They acquired Twistlock, they acquired Apparetto, a bunch of other companies throughout the last 12 months or so. And they announced Tuesday it plans to acquire the SD-WAN company CloudGenix for $420 million. It's not the most expensive recent acquisition. I think the Twistlock one was somewhere in the $500 million range, or they had one acquisition in the $500 million range, but still pretty close to the top of the stack there, and not an inconsiderable amount of money for the company. Palo Alto plans to roll the company into its existing Prisma Access SASE solution portfolio, providing it as a cloud managed service. So, Tom, my question to you, does this kind of prove that what we've maybe been hinting at for a while, that SD-WAN is just kind of a SASE feature now? And, what do you think Palo Alto saw in CloudGenix that made them acquire, of all the SD-WAN, there's SD-WAN flavor of the month everywhere you look. What was special about CloudGenix that made them pull the trigger?
Well, first of all, congrats to Kumar Ramachandran and his group for this exit. I have actually been watching this very closely for a while because CloudGenix was what I consider to be one of the last first generation SD-WAN vendors. When you look at VeloCloud, Viptela, CloudGenix, they were all right there on the forefront of developing the technology. And CloudGenix was the last one that hadn't been purchased yet. In fact, when they presented at Networking Field Day 22 back in February, I even kind of said something to that effect in my opening. Um, but when you look at where this is, a lot of the other vendors that are still kind of unaffiliated, vendors like Ariaka, they're very focused on providing services. They're not interested in hardware. So Ariaka is not a good fit for a box vendor. Palo Alto, and this is another thing too, as you mentioned, they're rolling it into Prisma, SASE. They're not displacing their existing firewall-based SD-WAN solution. Now, I would expect to see a lot of this happening pretty soon, where they kind of build them together. No, this is interesting because they're focused on SASE. I've been doing a lot of research on this recently, and CloudGenix has a good SASE play. For those of you who are not familiar, SASE is Secure Access Service Edge, which is a Gartner category for SD-WAN that is more security focused than it is connectivity focused. Ultimately, I think that this is good for Palo Alto because you get a company that has a lot of experience in this area and they are buying in to that market. Now, here's where it gets a little hairy. All of the vendors that were really first gen early developers are pretty much gone. I mean, you're down to maybe what, Versa Networks, and I honestly I'd have to think for the others. Everywhere else is being developed by business units inside of big organizations. So you've got Cisco, you've got Riverbed, you've got VMware, now you have Palo Alto. They're really working on differences in things. So I'm glad that this happened. I'm glad for the CloudGenix people, and I'm hopeful for the Palo Alto people. I know that there's a good roadmap for this. I'm just kind of curious to see how they spin it and how much of CloudGenix's development methodology and techniques filter down into the firewall SD-WAN platform that they're building out.
Yeah, and if they will follow, again, I don't, Palo Alto has a business model. This is going to roll into fit that. I don't think this is a stake in the ground that they're, making a hard shift. Very clearly, they're filling out,
Mhm.
kind of that entire like network, security from every single aspect, which I think is a really smart play. Whether they will, like you said, it seems like everyone else kind of realized, hey, um, SD-WAN, whether it's a feature or something, some sort of differentiator, we have our own purpose for rolling that into whatever product we have, whether we're Cisco or whoever we are. Whether they can make that compelling, because a lot of the people that are now offering competing solutions are going to be kind of in the same data center, or in the same organization as Palo Alto Networks, right? It's not like they own any kind of full stack other than on the security side, maybe specifically. But there's going to be other network equipment. There's going to be other vendors kind of in there that offer maybe something that competes with it. So yeah, whether it can be, hey, here's a box you plug in and it's no fuss, we'll handle everything else, cloud managed, don't worry about it. That will be interesting to see how that goes forward. Next up here, I thought this was an interesting. I wanted to put together a lot of different stories we've been seeing about this. At the start of everybody kind of working from home and related to COVID-19, definitely the big story was like, hey, everybody's using Zoom. Zoom is the new hotness. We're going to do our Zoom happy hour. Then we're going to do our Zoom stand-up meeting. Then we're going to go into our Zoom. Everybody's just going to be on it all the time. And everybody seemed to like it. It was kind of the hero of the moment, kind of stepped up in a big way. But it seems like this week, the bloom has kind of come off the rose, as it were. First off, there was a report from Vice that Zoom's use of a login from Facebook SDK on iOS was sending device info to Facebook, even if you weren't logged in. Essentially, Facebook is well known for using shadow profiles, but it seemed like Zoom had allowed this to happen as part of that application. Going from there, and then they released an update and said, okay, we're stripping that out. We're going to figure out a way to still have the login with Facebook without this information. We fixed it. Then there was the Intercept report that despite claims of using end-to-end encryption and marketing materials, kind of being out in front of that, Zoom actually uses what's called transport encryption, which encrypts it from third parties, but theoretically would allow Zoom or someone else that subpoenas Zoom to have access to calls. And now security researchers have demonstrated a flaw in Zoom's Windows client group chat feature that can leak Windows network credentials of anyone who clicks on shared links by a universal naming convention path injection. And just today, in fact, as I was preparing kind of this kind of came across my RSS feed, that security researcher Patrick Wardle published 2 zero-day exploits for Zoom on macOS. So, Tom, my question is this just Zoom playing fast and loose and kind of getting caught at an unprecedented, like an unforeseen amount of scaling that all of a sudden they're doing overnight? Or is this more of a, hey, they're the most popular platform? This is exactly what happened with Windows, right? You can argue if whether it was Windows is insecure or Windows just has the biggest target on their back. Is that just what's happening to Zoom now?
It's a little of A and a little of B. I don't know how many of those of you out there remember way back in the halcyon days of last year, when when Zoom was accused of being able to remotely trigger people's webcams to come on.
Yeah.
Remember how big of a deal that was? And oh my
Mm-hmm.
God, I can't believe you do that. And Zoom, to their credit, immediately reacted and shut it off. And they got a black eye for that. And let's be fair, they kind of deserve that. They Now here's where it comes into play. I've used WebEx recently. I've used GoToMeeting recently. I'm really actively trying to avoid whatever the hell the link for business video chat thing is, because yeah, that's a dumpster fire. Zoom is the only one that I've seen so far that has bucked up under the load. It hasn't fallen
Mm-hmm.
apart. It doesn't require a whole lot of really complicated infrastructure to work properly. And in the other room behind the magic green curtain, my kids and my wife are using it for education right now, because another thing is Zoom is basically opening themselves up to be free for educators for the next 3 or 4 months, which is great. I love that. Props to you guys for doing it. But the problem is that when everybody starts using your platform, now you have a big target on your back. And so that's where the little bit of B thing comes in. Now that everybody's using it, everybody's trying to exploit it because scammers going to scam and haters going to hate. So finding all of these functionalities that are built in here, yeah, you're right. We didn't find that in WebEx. Is it because it doesn't exist in WebEx, or because WebEx is enough of a crapshoot that people just don't want to use it? I can't say. I really don't know. I also don't have a subscription to use WebEx Teams in a way that would allow me to have hour-long video conference calls. Hey, guess what? Not obfuscating the meeting IDs for people and allowing direct dial for folks who have their rooms in. Yeah, it's a bit stupid. Greg Farrow just posted a blog post literally today about some ways to shut that off. You can't get it completely turned off, but you can make it difficult to deal with. I have a feeling that the URI thing is going to get patched, that the UNC stuff is going to get patched. The end-to-end encryption thing that we keep hearing about, that's a bigger solution that you're not going to have a lot of time to deal with. Here's the thing, folks, and I'm just going to level with you because, well, it's the apocalypse and I can. Remember the whole triangle of good, fast, and cheap? Pick two. You're kind of in a boat here where it works and it doesn't cost an arm and a leg. Security may be the third thing you're not going to get to choose yet. Now, again, props to the Zoom people because they seem to be figuring this stuff out pretty quickly. Doesn't mean we're not going to have problems in the future. It means that the Zoom engineers who are probably holed up in their houses, just like you are probably busting their butts to get this fixed. Is it a perfect software application? No, it's not, but they're trying. And if you think that that's not going to be a viable solution for what you need to do, stop making video calls or use FaceTime because it works. Now, it ain't perfect either, but I promise you, if you go try to use FaceTime or Skype or WebEx Teams or GoToMeeting or webinar platform of your choice, just do it for the rest of the week. And if you're not running back to Zoom screaming about how awesome it is, security holes and all, I'll eat the hat.
Yeah, I mean, if you're discussing, mission critical trade secrets, whatnot, maybe a Zoom call, if you need something that needs supreme privacy, one, maybe don't do a video chat, like is not the ideal way to do that in general. And maybe, again, if you need like NSA quality security, maybe Zoom isn't the choice to do right now. Maybe not even because it's insecure, not even because of the encryption, or just because it has the biggest target on its back. That being said, yeah, I do think it's interesting that we're seeing that now in the, kind of the security community, I think is definitely reacting to this. And I do think it is interesting, like going back to the web server thing. That was the whole thing last year where, yeah, they were installing this little tiny web server on Mac OS that would, make it was a convenience feature that had some security implications. I'm sure there were a lot of things that, hey, we made this thing work and it gives you a feature you like. Also, there are some concessions that you have to do that. I'm sure that's built into a lot of these messaging apps code, Zoom no exception. So not to downplay those concerns, I've heard people say, if you want, security, or if you want, privacy is the utmost importance, use something that is end-to-end encrypted, use FaceTime, use a WhatsApp call or something like that. Don't necessarily trust Zoom is even the wrong word. Like I don't even want to put it like you can't trust Zoom. There are just other platforms that are available to use for that regard. So just interesting. We'll keep track of, how the Zoom goodwill meter is going forward. In other news, though, of things that have been affected by COVID-19, there was an interesting article from TechCrunch, and I just kind of want to set this up. One of the primary benefits of using cloud for a startup, kind of across industries, is that consumption-based pricing, right? So you can kind of get started. You don't need to have a huge amount of capital investment to get started. You can just, hey, I'm going to spin up some AWS instances, and I can have some servers up. And I just need to pay for those per month. Works out, allows for easy scaling. You can see a lot of the appeal of it. In light of the financial crunch caused, though, by COVID-19, where a lot of these startups are seeing massively decreased customer bases and that kind of stuff, TechCrunch's Josh Constant published an editorial, AWS, Azure, GCP, and the other public cloud players, Oracle, Tom, to offer some sort of cloud relief, theoretically letting startups pause cloud infrastructure payments for 3 to 6 months and pay them back in installments later on, or if they agree to sign a longer-term contract or something like that, offer them a discounted rate, something like that. He agrees that aside from altruistic and PR reasons for doing this, hey, it looks good if you do it, cloud providers have an interest in this, in that a lot of their customers going out of business is not good for their bottom line either. We'll see if any of this gets resolved, but I think the more interesting discussion here is that in light of COVID-19, will we see startups reevaluating the wisdom of consumption pricing going forward as a result of this? It allows you to get started a lot quicker, but if you kind of pay that big bill at the front, you're not necessarily as vulnerable to this down the road for something unforeseen like this.
Uh, Man, I don't know about this because a lot of businesses don't buy their equipment like with cash. They buy it
Mhm.
with a lease or they
That's
buy it with
true.
some kind of a financing option. So you're still paying as you go. The only difference is that in the cloud, when you don't need to use that server and you turn it off, you aren't paying for it anymore. If you bought that server on a lease for the next 18 months and you turn it off, you're still making payments on it. It's the old adage of, if I wreck my car tomorrow, if insurance doesn't pay out on the gap, I'm still paying for my car that I can't drive anymore.
Hmm.
I don't know how well this idea of pausing payments for 30 days and then paying back in installments is going to work because, I mean, what if your business never gets back to the level that it was before? I, yes, there are some valid reasons for making this argument. I totally understand. But on the flip side, if your business is online and you are selling things online, I'll give you a perfectly good example of this. My sister-in-law runs a clothing boutique in the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma. She had to close her boutique because it's not considered to be a critical business. Totally understand that. Municipality rules exist.
Mm.
But she's doing gangbuster business doing online sales. So, those are shipping out, people are buying her clothes, she's staying afloat. Does that mean that she should not have to pay for the online storefront or the online order processing or things like that? Obviously, she shouldn't. Would it help her if she didn't have to pay those bills for the next 30 days? Yeah, probably. But does that mean that she's going to want to pay more for the next 6 months on an installment plan to get those things rolling forward? What happens if she gets to a point where like business suddenly nosedive again for some other reason and she doesn't
Mm.
get a forgiveness? And now you're back in the lease payment problem of I got to pay the bill for the stuff that I already accrued, so I'm stuck. There's no good solution for this. I applaud TechCrunch for trying to bring this whole idea of rent pauses to the cloud. I just don't know how this whole thing's going to work out.
Yeah, and the other aspect of that is, kind of Tom, to your point, if business is suffering, you're not doing as much. Theoretically, whatever cloud infrastructure you need, you would also need less of it. So you could,
Mhm.
because you're using consumption-based devices, you're consuming less, you're using less storage or whatever, you're generating less analytics, whatever it is that you're doing. Theoretically, that cost would somewhat go down. Obviously, to maintain operations, there's a baseline cost, certainly. And kind of to say, okay, is CapEx the answer here? In that instance, no, that is a fixed cost, and that's never going to, change. Maybe your provisioning schedule or something like that isn't as rapid or something like that. So some good points. I think the main point of it, and I think John in his piece was fairly open about this. He was like, I just want to get this conversation started, and that despite the startups being customers of these cloud providers, it's also a mutually beneficial relationship, even if the public cloud providers certainly have all of the, the majority of the leverage in that case. So I thought it was interesting to get that conversation going. It's something I hadn't thought of previously.
Yeah.
And then finally here, I just wanted to finish up here real quick with Microsoft announced that Teams will launch a consumer version later this year aimed at families and small groups. They cited things like sharing grocery lists, organizing family calendars, storing Wi-Fi passwords, and other account info stared in a group that will be part of Android and iOS previews in the coming months. They also announced this extremely weird thing about Skype as a standalone product with a corporate VP Yusuf Mehdi telling TechCrunch, Skype today is used by 100 million people on a monthly basis. The way I think about it is that Skype is a great solution today for personal use. A lot of broadcast companies use it as well. I don't know why Microsoft hates Skype since they spent $9 billion on it. But what what I'm trying to wrap my head around Teams for consumers. Does that make any sense to you, Tom? It kind of almost reminds me of Evernote, the way they wanted to expand into kind of being a broader life organization platform. They kind of want to do the opposite, right? They were kind of the Teams for consumers and then going into corporate, and that kind of failed miserably. What's the read on this? Obviously, other than we want more subscription revenue.
Well, yeah, that's what it is. I mean, the read on it is that we need to start drinking because some people have obviously lost their damn minds. There's two problems that are this. First of all, I want to point out the fact that we are releasing Teams for consumers. Teams used to be Link for Business, which was Office Communicator, which at some point was renamed Skype for Business. So we now have Skype
Oh.
for Business for consumers, or just Skype. Um, that lineage just blows my mind. Here's the other thing, though. The idea of having a lifestyle compute platform is not old. I'm sorry, it's not new. It's actually
Mm.
really, really old. And I'm going to go all the way back to pre-Nadella Microsoft, pre-Ballmer Microsoft, all the way back to Billy Gates Microsoft when he created a thing called Microsoft Bob, which was a user interface for the operating system that did not look like a computer. It looked like a lifestyle program where I would just want to do things with Skype. Sorry, not Skype, with the operating system, and they were there. It was like, think of it like an application suite. So, realistically speaking, Nadella's onto something here. I don't know what it is, because when you look at the way that most people use platforms, like Slack is overkill for my family. We have a text message thread, we have a shared calendar. Sometimes we need to do things. What's the Wi-Fi password? Like you said, I need to have a place where I can add things to a grocery list. Well, I don't want to buy my wife a subscription to Things. She doesn't really need to use Drafts. Do we use the shared Microsoft Apple Note? Well, that works if we're all on Apple devices. But what happens if my son suddenly gets an Android tablet from school? Well, now we're stuck there too. So the idea is sound in theory. And if it works, great. What's it going to cost? Because I'm not paying $50 a month so all of my family can have a synchronized grocery list.
Yeah.
And there are apps that are out there that do that just well. And honestly, if I'm going to have to spend $50, I'll buy Things for all of my family, create a Things team, and I can keep everything there, and we'll figure out a solution for sharing Wi-Fi passwords.
Yeah, that's to me is the biggest hurdle is, Teams, Slack, all of these, any of their paid models are per user. And I just see like that just incentivizes you to just have the one Teams for consumers thing and then share it too broadly, which kind of muddles its usefulness. And like, because no one's going to, I mean, at least for me personally, like, I don't want to spend for my, my parents, my brothers, my in-laws and stuff like that to all be on this and to try and convince each one of them to pay for it. It just seems very weird. The other thing to me is this seems like a service in search of hardware, which seems opposite to what Microsoft wants to do. Like this seems to me the perfect companion thing, almost something that I would want from Google on one of their Google Hubs or something like that, where that is then the interface that I can access a lot of these more consumer focused services. Microsoft is definitely, they're getting out of even the virtual assistant game, right? With kind of decommissioning or rolling Cortana into its own very specific use cases. So I don't know. And obviously no virtual assistant is going to want to open up. Like I'm never going to be able to run any meaningful consumer Teams experience on an Alexa or on a Microsoft or on a Google Hub or something like that. So to me, this is new Microsoft. Maybe they're playing some 3D chess and I can't keep up, but doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
All right. That just about does it for the Gestalt IT Rundown for this week. We'll be back every Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time at youtube.com/Gestalt IT video with another live episode. So make sure you subscribe, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and see us here every week. We also post the videos to our Facebook page, facebook.com/Gestalt IT. We'll be back next Wednesday to talk all about the IT news of the week that was. And remember, we also have a podcast feed. Just search for Gestalt IT Rundown in your podcatcher of choice. You can get it as an audio feed and listen to your heart's content on whatever pretend commute that you have now. Until then, for myself, for Tom Hollingsworth, and for all of us here in the Gestalt IT family, here's wishing you and yours to have a super sparkly day.